Well, good morning everybody. It's the Saturday, the 26th of June in 2021. What we see here is just a picture showing the journalist or researcher Jeremy Coyle. But what I'm going to do is provide in the links to and comments, as it were, a link to his very long interview. It's over an hour. That really helps to explain the situation better and best, shall we say, on this UFO. Other thing is UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena situation, and also the report from from Pentagon to Congress, and what it's all about. But in brief, a lot of people have expressed their dismay or concern or disappointment that the report is ridiculously short. It's 9 pages. And it doesn't conclude what a lot of people want to see happen. In other words, that, we're dealing with alien technology here. And that would frighten people. And by the way, this sort of thing's been going on, shall we say, in the sense of denial and all the rest of it for over 70 years. All these sightings that were made by credible people, serious close encounters with craft and so on. You've seen the planet Venus, or you've seen swamp gas, or maybe it's a experimental aircraft, and so on. That is all over. And by the way, Air Force pilots and commercial air pilots and crew and so on are now encouraged for the first time in 70 years to report these things and record as best they can all of these incidents. And we can hope to come to a much more conclusive conclusion, shall we say, to the whole thing. But those people, and I'm not alone in this, who have studied the subject or were very well aware of the subject, read books, seen lots of videos, been kept right up to date, shall we say, with it for more than 50 years, are quite aware that some, and I do repeat, some of the UFOs are alien craft. Now, people would say, how do you know that? And, that's jumping to conclusions. And so the report says it can't rule it out. That's correct. Can't rule it out. But when you look at some of the cases, and then this Jeremy Coyle, you want to look at the interview. I know it's long, but check it out. You're dealing with craft, and they describe them as craft, and they describe them as vehicles that can, for example, in one case they were one came from space, would you believe? Actually, you saw it coming in, sitting at 80,000 feet altitude and falling from 80,000 feet to 50 feet and hovering at that 50 feet in less than 1 second. And they calculated the speed to be 40,000 miles an hour. And then there was another radar image, and they show the image of the craft suddenly leaving the screen like a streak. It's gone, and they estimated it to be 46,000 feet. Now, I've got a friend, John Edwards, who's a fundamentalist Christian, and he's not prepared to believe almost anything, no matter what the evidence is. But I explained to him, well, you're going to ask straight away, this isn't a personal message, but you're going to ask straight away, how on earth do you know that it was doing 46,000 miles an hour? Well, what happened was there were aircraft carriers, I think about 60 miles off the coast of San Diego, I believe, in one case, and another aircraft carrier a further 60 miles to the east of that point. Now, the craft left the radar screen on one radar, in other words, one ship, and appeared instantly almost, within seconds, on the other ship's radar. Now the exact times are of course shown on the screen, right to the second. And they said, well, this was doing 46,000 miles an hour to get from a standing start to a standing stop, shall we say, in a matter of seconds. Now, my friend John and others say, oh, this could be a drone, this could be from China, or it could be from Russia. Maybe their technology has leaped forward from the United States, the technology. Sorry guys, it doesn't work quite like that because of the speed. You have no missiles and no aircraft and certainly no drones that can do 46,000 miles an hour and manoeuvre instantly to that speed from a standing stop, let's say, to a standing stop at another end of the thing, just zip over to the next one. And then when you look at many cases now, this report will only cover the last few years. It's like nothing compared to what exists. But beforehand, years ago, there are many reports, but one that stands out in my imagination or my memory is a Japan Airlines flight in 1980s. They were flying a 747, a cargo flight. They only had the pilot, the co-pilot and the navigator. The craft was off to one side, shall we say, and the pilot, and it's all recorded, it's all on air traffic control recordings. He said, if you've got another aircraft up here, there's one off to our, let's say to our right. No, they said, we don't, no. Okay, well, there's a craft there, there's something out there. And then it was, it would go over the top of it, they didn't see it, they'd go below it. And at one point, they got that plane to do a complete 360, which is extremely unusual. It's going to take several miles to go around in a full circle. Or maybe you'll lose this thing, whatever it is. Well, it was on the radars as two separate blips, but then it suddenly became one blip. The reason it became one blip is because the object or the craft or vehicle, call it what you like, was either directly above the 747 or directly below it, always at this time, in other words, travelling at 600 miles an hour. Then it travelled in front of the aircraft, which puts the wind up anybody who's flying. And the pilot said, this thing is the size of an aircraft carrier. It's about 300 feet or so in diameter. Well, all of that's in recording. And now the guy would have passed away years ago. He was a Japanese Air Force. He was a Zero pilot, which I believe during World War II. So obviously the guy is probably no longer with us, unless he's an extremely old man. And that report was credible, had three very well trained witnesses and recordings of and radar tracking and so forth. There are many reports of similar standard that are around, but they're not prepared to say, oh, these look like alien craft. The reason is, even though they know that, even that's in their heart, and you can talk to this guy, Jeremy Corbell, tells a lot about it. I'm giving a reasoning here that is not talked about in general, not discussed really in general, but would have been discussed by members of Congress and the US Senate when putting the report together. You have millions of people around the world, and many millions even in the United States, are what we describe as Pentecostal Christians. Now, before you think, well, nothing wrong with that, that's okay. Well, the reality is, I'm a Christian myself, but to have a Pentecostal Christian, that is to say, someone who takes the Bible, now let's get literally word for word, rather than what I now believe is parables. Even creation, I believe, is a parable for uneducated man at the time, to try and explain how he came about and what happened and so on. But you've got these people who think, well, there's heaven, there's God, there's angels, there's the earth, and the entire universe, and I know some of them personally. They think, well, that's all there is in the universe. There's no such thing as races created by God or anyone else, and I believe they are wrong. And this will be revealed over a period of time. It'll take a while for some dramatic events to occur, and I can't really predict them here, but I think many people will know what I'm talking about. For example, the craft that were crashed and recaptured, and the bodies that were taken and put into chemicals and kept aside and all that sort of thing. And people say, oh, you must be joking. And I'm not joking. You can laugh if you like, but there's been that sort of thing has happened. Now, I take that research as genuine. That comment on the subject, many comments in books and everything else on the subject, to be genuine. Now, I don't care whether people think that's a stupid thing to say. I've got no concern about that. But if that comes out and they actually bring the bodies out, and by the way, and people will say when they view this, oh, but the government has reported that upon everything it knows. Wait a minute, the government is not a single entity. The government is just what you know of it. In the case of the United States, the President, the Congress, the Air Force and Army and everything else operate entirely separately than the government. And what they do, and what they don't have to tell people why they held these craft, why the bodies were put aside and that they are aside. They don't tell them anything. Now, the US President, and a lot of people hearing this and seeing this, this video, will realise that the US President has a certain level of clearance. He can see, or he or she can see certain things and other things. When asked about it, by the way, and you've had presidents including Bill Clinton, George Bush and others, I understand, of course, even Donald Trump would have said, oh, what do you know about UFOs and what do you know about these aliens and everything else? They'd say, well, sir, we can't tell you. You're not permitted to know about it. So I just thought I'd make some of these comments. Now, I welcome polite and civil comments on this, and I would say we've got other revelations to come. Do your research, as this Jeremy Corbell says. Dig deep, get into it. Don't be ashamed of what you're to find out on these things. You can cross-check, double-check, triple-check on lots of these things, and you'll find that there are things that have happened over many decades that are startling and amazing, and all the rest of it. So I'd leave you with that, guys, but I just thought I would make a few comments on the topic.